In this section, we are discussing a very basic question, that is the difference between function scope and block scope. The category is the programming language, that is the JavaScript language, and there are three relative questions which can be asked with this topic. So before we start discussing the difference between function and block scope, we must understand what is the scope of a variable. Now the scope can be of a variable and function, so the logic remains same. When I say scope of a variable, that means it is a lifetime or availability of a variable. For example, if you declare a variable in one function, then it won't be available in the other function. Let's try with an example. I'm going to define a function A and declaring a variable in it. Now I have another function, function B, and I'm trying to display the value of X. Let's try to call both A and B. Here when we run the code, it is giving an error that X is not defined. That is, X is not available because variable X is declared in function A and I'm trying to access or refer to it in function B. This means the scope of a variable X is limited to function A. In other words, variable X is local to function A. Scope of a variable can be local or global. At the moment, variable X is local to function A. Let's make the variable X global. Global variable will be accessible for all functions. And to make a variable global, we declare it outside all the functions. This variable I'm going to declare above function A. Now I'm changing the value. I'm adding 5 to variable X in function A, and then I'm referring value of X in function B. Let's run the code. So now the output is 15. Both function A and B are referring to the same variable. So X is global and available to the entire piece of code. Now coming to the discussion of difference between function scope and block scope. ES5 has function scope and that is because of hoisting, but ES6 does not have hoisting. Remember, if you are declaring a variable with var keyword, then hoisting will be there. Let's try to understand the term hoisting and block scope separately. We will begin with hoisting. Let's say we have a variable called variable X. Now if I try to display this variable before it is declared, let me first of all try some other variable which is not existing anywhere in the code. If I run this, it says that Y is not defined. There is a problem because Y is not existing. Now on this line 1, what if I say X? This also doesn't exist on this line, but still if I run this code, instead of giving any error, it says it is undefined. Let me also try to assign a value to variable X and I run it again. Then also it says undefined. The reason is that internally the JavaScript compiler finds all the variable declarations which are declared with the var keyword and it brings all the declarations. Remember, only the declaration and not the assignments. So internally what happens? Internally it actually says var X like this and internally it will be something like this. So naturally it has to show undefined at this point. Remember, I am showing you in this code window, but this actually happens internally behind the scene, so you do not see it. Earlier, when JavaScript was introduced, there was no specific way of writing the language. It was not very rigid about rules of declaring variables. At that time, the compiler used to search through entire function and it used to bring all the declarations on top. That means if you have declared, let's say var X somewhere in the function here, and you have 10 lines after that, you have one more var X just in case, right? Even though there is a curly bracket, that is there is a block, right? Let's say you have a for loop. Imagine that you have a for loop and there you have declared variable X once again. what will happen? The feature of hoisting will search through entire code in the function for that function only. Remember, only for one function, for each function. It will search through all the variables, right? And it will bring it on top. So what happens here? X comma X. X also comes on top. So at a time in ES5, that is with var keyword, you can declare only one variable in a function. This is what hoisting is. Hoisting means it is bringing the declaration on top, not the assignment. So if you have var x is equal to 9, 9 remains there only. So this is about variable hoisting, right? Now let's talk about block scope. Block scope is introduced from ES6 onwards, and we are using the let keyword there. So for example, I have to declare, let's say, let x is equal to 9. Now again, I am having a block which is just a curly bracket. You may have an if condition, you may have a for loop, doesn't matter. Even just like this, curly brackets, that's also a block. Now I declare let x, the same name I am using, and saying that, let's say 8. So now there are two different values also. Let me also refer the value. So I'll say console log x, right? So we have the same name in the same scope, in the same function. And if I run this, this is running absolutely fine because the let keyword doesn't do hoisting. The JavaScript compiler doesn't hoist variables declared with the let keyword, right? So we do not use var keyword anymore, but still if you are using var keyword, hoisting will happen, right? So here we have variable x declared in the same scope, and it is working fine because it's not going to be hoisted on top. The way we tried with hoisting, let's say I display the value of x and then I declare x, right? If I do this, see what happens. It says it cannot access x before initialization. Now it is not showing undefined. So hoisting is not happening here. So now you know what is block scope and what is variable hoisting. Or you can say function scope, because when hoisting is there, you have function scope, that is one variable for each function. You cannot have another variable with same name in ES5 or with var keyword. Let's discuss about relative questions of this topic. Question 1, there can be a question that what is hoisting? We have already discussed that it is about a process which is happening behind the scene. We do not see that. As a developer, as an end user, we do not see that. Internally, it is bringing the declarations on top. That's what hoisting is. The second question is, how does block scope work? So we have already seen that a block scope is nothing but the brackets. Anyway, you put it, whether it is an if condition, for loop, do while, or even just curly brackets you put. That is a block created, and that creates a separate world, separate scope for those declarations existing in that particular block. The third question can be, what is scope of a variable? So scope is nothing but the availability or visibility or lifetime of a variable. So this is all about variable scope, hoisting, and block scope.